I don't know how it happened, only how it started. I thought it was just my overactive imagination, but then things escalated. I know for sure that I'm being haunted and it's driving me off the edge. I'm overdrawing this. I'll just tell you the story. My friend has schizophrenia. Not different personalities. That's called dissociative identity disorder. Schizophrenia deals more with things like auditory and visual hallucinations. Depending on the severity, it can be treated with medication, or so she has told me. The medication is actually the reason this is happening to me. Her doctors took her off to see how she would react. 3 days after, she was over at my house watching TV with me in my room. I've grown accustomed to her disorder, how she would look around the room in the middle of a conversation, or seem like she was ignoring you when you spoke, because she would be looking at a hallucination. During the time she was there, she gradually grew from flickering her eyes over to a corner in my room to intently staring at it. I asked her what she was seeing and she replied with, "It's nothing." I went with that response until she started crying. I asked her again and this time she responded with, "There's a girl in your corner that's crying blood." I told her that it was just a hallucination and she should ignore it. When I said that, she looked at me with such fear in her eyes that I was paralyzed. She said that I shouldn't say that I was making the girl angry. I shook my head and smiled reassuringly that the little girl didn't exist and couldn't hurt me. My friend looked away from me and back to the corner, immediately starting to sob. Later that night, I lay on my bed, bored, unable to sleep due to obvious reasons. I was about to turn on some music when I heard my cat meowing from the living room. Needing something to do, I went out to see what was bothering her. I found her staring at a dark corner of the living room. Her hair was on end and she was hissing quietly. I was creeped out by this and I bent down to pet her, but she didn't react to my touch. She just stared at the corner. I started back for my room, and she then let out an ear-splitting shriek, the kind when a cat's tail is stepped on or if it's surprised. I immediately turned around, my heart pounding to see nothing. She was gone. What bothered me was that she would have to run into the kitchen and I didn't hear her hitting the hardwood that makes up the kitchen floor. I looked around the living room, under furniture, and then the kitchen. She was just gone. As I left the kitchen, the sound of a knife being pulled from its holster emanated from behind me. I turned and the knives looked completely untouched. I thought I was delusional from lack of sleep and went to my room. I was interrupted. There was a tapping noise in the living room that stopped me. As I stood in the middle of the room, I looked towards the large window next to the front door. The curtains were closed but slightly askew, which allowed me to see the pale, white hand tapping on the window. I ran for my room, slamming and locking the door behind me. I cowered in the corner of my bed, which was in the corner of my room. I sat with the blankets over my head, heart beating fast, my breath heavy. Then the thudding began, seeming far off but got louder and closer. My back was to the wall of my room that was being the outside wall of the house, and that thudding increased till I could feel it right behind me. Silence, no noise besides my heart and breath. Next to my bed is another large window covered by a thick curtain. I gathered my courage and came out of my blankets just enough to peek the curtain back and look out. It was pitch black and nothing was out there besides the bushes. I pulled the curtain's edge back a bit more and then the thudding began again. So loud, drowning everything out. I looked back into my room to make sure I was alone and returned my gaze to the window to see the pale white face of a girl. Her eyes were large black voids with blood streaming down her face. I woke up the next morning. My cat was sleeping next to me. Ever since that night, I've seen her over and over. She hunts me every night. Every dark space, I see her. And I know she's real because she killed my friend, the one with schizophrenia. She was found face down in a pool of blood. She bled out from her eyes. I feel that the same thing will happen to me soon. I hope by listening to this, she doesn't latch on to you. I hope it ends with me. It's 4 a.m. right now and she's out there. The thudding is driving me to write this. The thudding never stops, and neither does she. I awoke to the sounds of my mother in the kitchen. Groggily, I swung my legs out from under the covers and got dressed in jean shorts and a simple white t-shirt. Then I grabbed a white cloth off my dresser. It was a bandana that I had found earlier in the year, in January. It was in a box at a yard sale labeled, "Do not wear in sunlight." A funny joke, I thought. I took it to the lady running the sale. She was old and frail. She stared at me. "Don't wear that in the sun." I laughed and bought it anyway. I put it on my head and tied it in the back. I'd never worn it before. As I walked into the kitchen, my mother said to me, "Darling, can you go out to the shed and get the hedge clippers? I need you to trim the holly bushes out front." I agreed to do what she asked. After all, she was my mom. So I strolled down to the cobblestone path behind our house towards the shed. As I neared that old shed, I noticed how hot it was outside. It was so hot outside that the heat was coming off of the surface of the shed in waves. I pushed open the door. "Ow!" I exclaimed. The sizzling door blistered my hand. I shook it off and went inside. Oh, it was sweltering. I immediately broke into a sweat. The drops rolled off my nose and onto the dirt floor of the shed. I wanted to quickly find the hedge clippers. As I dug around in a toolbox, the sweat on my face started to blur my vision. I wiped my brow and was surprised to find that the sweat didn't come off. I passed it off as a trick of the heat, blinked my eyes and found the hedge clippers. I left the shed only to find even more heat outside. Oh, it was painful, but I had to do what my mom asked or I'd be in trouble. I climbed to the front yard and started on the bushes. The sun bared down on my back and arms. Even my butt felt like fire, and I was crouching, hiding it from the sun. My front and face and feet and fingers were all burning too. The heat was unmeasurable, intense, and I suffered all afternoon. Every time I tried to wipe the sweat away, it stayed and got sucked up in my bandana, which created a soaking wet veil on my head. And finally the bushes were finished. I quickly retreated inside and into my room to get clothes. Then I flew into my bathroom to take a shower and clean up. I gasped at my reflection. Bright red skin stretched over my face and back and front. No tan lines were visible. My whole body was sunburned and the sweat remained unclearable from my vision. I touched my skin. Agony erupted all over my body. I then realized I hadn't removed the bandana. I tried to pull it off. It wouldn't come. I tried in vain to rip it from my head, but it wouldn't budge. On the third attempt, I accidentally touched my burned skin. In a fit of pain, I scratched my forehead. My skin was already peeling. I took hold of the peeled piece and pulled, eyes closed, for I could sense the coming agony, but it didn't come. I continued to pull at the piece. Finally, it came loose. I opened my eyes and screamed. My face had been peeled off, and the bandana had come with it. I looked at the bandana in horror. The memory of the box it was in was coming back to me. Slowly, the rest of my skin on my head fell off, peeling in slow motion. I watched in horror as the skin of my arms and legs went. Just as my eyes burned, bloodshot, were about to fall out, I noticed a brownish smeared words on that bandana, written in blood and sweat. I warned you not to wear it in the sun.
If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you'd like to, you can follow me at Twitter. The handle is @FuzzyPantaloons, and I'll see you all next time.